but it wasn't for me. I probably came to the realization that I was probably twice as good a cricketer as I was running. But very rarely do we fail and fail miserably enough to make you completely stop. You're an item that can be used and thrown away whenever you want.
What has parenthood taught you about life?
It's not about you anymore, it's about these little people running around that are going to potentially shape the world. Really good way to impact people, to allow them to realise that everything actually is okay. We're just going to get through that little dark fiery bit at the start. We did this and you were okay. Everyone's different. I just need the support from my wife and then I'm good to go.
I just want to start this episode with a message of gratitude for everyone who tunes in each and every week. Thank you. I feel like I owe you a massive thank you for all your love and all your support. You've allowed me to grow and connect with so many amazing people, have so many amazing conversations, which I'm then able to go and share with you. So thank you for allowing me to do this and supporting what I'm doing. Can I ask you a favor though? And I can't tell you how much this can change the course of the podcast, the guests that I get on, everything that happens around here, just by doing one simple thing. And that simple thing is pressing the subscribe button. It honestly helps so much in allowing the podcast and the guests to just get bigger and better. And I sit here and I think about the next 12 months and what that's going to look like. And a lot of that is going to be fueled off the back of your love, your support for the podcast and everything that's happening here. So from my heart, thank you. Let's keep doing it. And I can't wait to see what the next 12 months holds for this show and for us as a community. Enjoy the episode. Dave Harvey, welcome to the podcast, man. Appreciate you taking some time out of day to come and join me.
Mate, appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Been a long time coming.
I know. I love to, I want to start this podcast by asking you generally, like, how are you? Because when we ask that question, we usually maybe, yeah, good, all right, living the dream. I want to know, man, like, how are you today?
Mate, I'm good. That's a really good question, that, because, people generalise a bit of a grey area. Mate, I'm really good. Actually. I've had a really good week. Family, training, everything, business. It's been really good. So right now, I'm good. I've got a day off. Not working, not training. Spend time with the girls. So really good mindset, really good headspace today.
You need those days off, don't you? Just to kind of reset, spend quality time with the family, because we can get so caught up in our day-to-day tasks that we kind of forget to take time for ourselves.
Yeah, I think people just lose focus. They don't necessarily lose focus on, their goals or what they're trying to achieve. They lose focus on themselves. And that's a huge reset button. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to reset, refocus. It could be 15 minutes, could be 20. I like to take 5 minutes, sit down, have a coffee, and I'm good to go. Just that me time for a short period of time and tends to work.
What do we need to know about yourself to better understand the man that you are today?
Well, I'm a different man. That's a really good question. Probably the last 5 years, I've kind of flipped, maybe 6 years flipped on its head, a little bit longer. Rewind back to early days, so pre-marriage, been married twice. And the first marriage, a nice guy, more reactive than proactive, if that makes sense. So a bit more reactive to certain situations, scenarios, whether it be family orientated, whether it be individualized work, rugby at the time. Today, fast forward 5 years, much calmer, much more in tune with myself, and much more aware of other people's struggles, much more aware of what people are going through, and much more concerned about that, with a better understanding of mental health, which is huge for me. But yeah, so where I am today, besides the sport and the business and whatnot, a lot of self-work, which I'm enjoying the journey, but I'm learning every day.
What was that shift from that version of you 5 years ago in the past marriage to, where you are now? Was there something that happened?
I think it's my wife now. So Cassie, we've been married 5 years this year, and obviously 2 kids. So the kids change your perspective, complete perspective of life, and it's not about you anymore. Like I said, 5 minutes for a coffee, that's good enough for me. I'm good to go. It's not about you anymore. It's about these little people running around that are going to potentially shape the world, and you need to shape them to be able to, foresee that. The shift would have been just through my wife, like in terms of like her mindset, her struggles with anxiety and depression, her mental health struggles, and me taking a while to understand that, but finally getting to a point to see her and understand how one struggles with it, and her coping mechanisms and her signs and signals, and then just building a lot more patience and resilience to it. Tolerance is not the word, because for me, I think tolerance is you tolerate something you don't enjoy. And, I obviously don't enjoy my wife struggling, but there's also, she needs to get through those periods to thrive and be herself. I think that's been the major shift, just grounding ourselves, sticking true to what we believe in, and ensuring that each day, each week, each month, we're just holding our boundaries, holding our ground, and trying to build what we want to build, as opposed to what external factors want us to build.
What's that process like for you coming into this new relationship, Cassie, and she has her own struggles, and for you, you may not have experienced those struggles before, or being with someone that's had those struggles. How do you process that, and how do you better understand her and how to deal with that? Because there's a lot of people out there in relationships and they quite don't know what to do when their partner may have anxiety attack or poor mental health, and they kind of go into shock because they're like, wow, what do I do? And instead of holding space and helping the situation, sometimes they make it worse, just out of the pure fact as they don't know what to do. So for you, I ask, what was the process like to better understand that and deal with that?
So that's a really good question. So with that, early on, I didn't really understand it too much. I knew there was a little struggles, and thinking back now, like when we first met, in terms of the, she'll probably laugh at this if she listens, but the hot and cold messaging, it'll be on or off, but it'll still be like messaging, but it wouldn't be like a blank. It'd be like, we can't do this, etc., and so on. And then stemming back to thinking about it now, it's like, well, it actually wasn't her talking; it was her anxiety about the situation. That's what caused it. And at the start, to be honest, I probably didn't understand it. I probably had a fair sense of mental health understanding through my own rugby career, through being rejected early on, and trying to prove myself week in, week out. And that's on a completely different depth and completely different level, at a much lower level than one of anxiety and depression. But I think over time, just really trying to focus in and understand and look for signs, look for signals. And I probably do my own investigations in regards to what mental health is, how to cope. But with anything like that, the best way to understand, I feel, is to actually see it and experience it. You can read as many books as you like. You can listen to as many podcasts. You can, do as many workshops if you like, but without having to actually see it. Like, for instance, we'll tell our family and be like, we can't do something with, we're tired, whatever, and we're a little bit more open about it now. It's like, oh, my wife's sick, or I'm struggling with a little bit of anxiety. Most of them just brush it off. So, okay, you'll be okay tomorrow, but that's not necessarily the case. But over time, it's just more so just understanding how she ticks, and the want and the need. What I find that I said to a client yesterday, just coaching a client in nutrition, and she struggles a little bit as well. She was mentioning that some of her family don't understand it, what she's going through. And it's the same. What I feel is that some people find it uncomfortable within themselves to actually see comfort and hold space for someone that is struggling with a little bit of anxiety and depression. And that triggers something in them. And I feel like it's more upon them as opposed to the external factor that's causing their issues. But at the moment now, we've got a good little, wouldn't say tools in place, but we've got a good little way of doing things in regards to, taking the girls, making them get outside, getting some sun, getting some water, trying to get to the ocean as much as we can, which is very rare these days. It's a long way from the Blue Mountains. But mate, it's not easy. The journey hasn't been easy, and it's still evolving.
Have you personally experienced anxiety? Because I've seen a post about your most recent competition, and you had anxiety around swimming, which you said was related to past trauma.
Yep.
So what's anxiety like? How do you personally experience it?
Look, I think anxiety is different for everyone, and there's different levels. And for me, it's like a fearful factor. It is getting scared, getting on edge, being apprehensive, procrastinating. And and the fear of the unknown, and not necessarily more so doubt and not believing in oneself. That's kind of my anxiety, how it sits. And that, yeah, like I said, that stemmed from, as a kid, I wasn't a good swimmer. I remember as a child jumping in the water at a swimming carnival and doing a 50-meter swim and getting out halfway. And I can still see it in my head now. It's almost like it's imprinted in my brain. And then growing up, I was always reminded of that, or was always reminded that I was a poor swimmer. Even to a point now where not long ago, like if I said I was going swimming, my mum would be like, "Oh, you're swimming," like as in you can't swim.
Yeah.
It's 30 years later, and that still is like, well, that still hurts. Like it still strikes the chord. It still triggers a response with from some childhood trauma. And to be able to face that was pretty cool. To come out on the other end was even better, to be honest. Like the feeling and the euphoria around it, surviving and doing quite well, which was really nice. But the struggle and the lead up, like anxiety for me is it's not so much that short, sharp breathing. It's not so much that it's dark places. It's more of like a fear factor for me.
I can relate to that. So she, you tell your mum, "Why I'm going swimming," and she goes, "You're going swimming, really?" And for me, it wasn't swimming. It was simply talking to people, because I was naturally shy and introverted. I really kept in my comfort zone. I wouldn't go and speak to new people and put myself out there. So anytime I would, my parents would be like so surprised, like, "Wow, you actually did that?" Like, surely not.
Yeah.
And that hurt, and that really cemented in me that I can't do it, which is a big reason why I started this podcast, to not only prove to myself, to prove to everyone else, like, wow, Nick can actually sit on a podcast and speak to people that he hasn't met before. Even though I still get anxious, like even today I'm a bit anxious sitting here waiting for you to rock up. I'm like, fuck. Like writing all these scenarios through my head, but like we're here right now, we're having a conversation. 5 years ago, I wouldn't be doing this. So I can totally relate to that. And it's very interesting, people's perspectives on anxiety and how it affects them differently. What's your perspective when it comes to anxiety? Do you see it as a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think it's either, to be honest. I've seen people struggle with it. So I've seen my wife struggle with it, and the potential consequences can be horrific. My girls have seen it, firsthand, and obviously they're too young, they don't understand it. And there's questions, why, what's happening. And I've seen, look, I don't think it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's certainly not a comfortable thing for the person that's experiencing it. But also at the same time, if one can recognize those signs, those signals, and why, or maybe what's causing that anxiety, then it's potentially more on the positive asset, because then they can work through that process and they can try and get past, whatever's causing that anxiety. It might be, crowds of people, COVID's causing anxiety of people leaving homes, and germs and touching stuff and stuff like that. It could be anxiety of like you of speaking. It could be me of swimming. It could be, in terms just a chemical imbalance, which is very hard to control, which is most of the time people with anxiety, I feel it's not their fault. And I think those words is what most people need to hear, not want to hear. I don't think they need reassurance. I think they need to hear that, and they need to know it's not their fault, because it wasn't your fault that you're introverted.
Yeah.
And that it built up trauma over time. And then, your parents will, "Oh, you're speaking to people." Whereas on the flip side, it'd be like, instead of going, "Oh, wow, you're speaking to people," they should be like, "Oh, wow, I'm so proud of you." And then that instills a little bit more confidence, because those initial words, to me, it's the same. Like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you, you did the event." It's like, "Oh, wow, you did swimming." So that's, to them, it's like, "Oh, wow, you did swimming, well done." But to me, it's like, well, hold on, you've said the same thing, but you've reworded it, and it's triggered the same response. A really good friend of ours does a lot of work in this space. He sent me a message, and I knew where he was going with it. All it was, "How did you go?" Because he knew where I stood and whatnot. And I just wrote back, "Yep, really proud." He's like, "Perfect." That's all I needed. Sometimes little words like that, but yeah, I don't necessarily see it as a
good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to see it as a negative thing, because I let it control me, to the point where I would be like physically fatigued, not want to get out of bed, vomiting, shakes, all this kind of stuff, because I created all these scenarios in my head. And it wasn't until someone flipped my perspective from, it's not actually bad, it's anxiety is actually something that you need to go towards. It's a sign of something that you need to deal with. You need to go talk to that person. You need to start that new business, whatever the case may be. It's a sign of something that you need to actually do. And once I flipped that perspective and started looking into it more and realized on a physiological level, anxiety and excitement have the same symptoms. So now I'm like, yeah, okay, I might be feeling anxious, but to myself, I'm like, I'm actually excited. And just by flipping that perspective, it really shifts your mindset from letting it control you to you having the self-awareness to be able to take control of that. And you mentioned it's not your fault when it comes to anxiety, and I totally agree with that. But to me, I also believe you have to take personal responsibility too. You can't let it control you. You have to be able to take control of it and have the self-awareness to be able to work through that. Yeah, so many people let it debilitate them and take control of their lives. And it's very sad to see, because when it comes to anxiety, mental health, I think 95% of the time, a lot of it's preventable. We just create too many scenarios in our head, and society goes, you need medication, you need this, you need that. A lot of the times it comes down to just sitting with yourself, having the self-awareness, exercising, hydration, these basic tools that you and myself implement in our day-to-day lives have such an impact on our mental health and how we can deal with these, anxieties when they may arise in our life. So yeah, it definitely comes down to, yes, it's not your fault, but at the same time, you can't let it control you. You've got to take radical responsibility for your life.
No, great. It's especially like the touch on like exercise, diet, hydration, sleep. Sleep's a big one. I see the patterns when there's not enough sleep. There's falling into fatigue, then they fall into anxiety. Your mind's tired, your body's tired, and it's easily drift into that space. It's about the consistency and to a certain extent, the discipline to have that ability to continue those coping mechanisms and your structures in place to allow you to be better. And someone's journey might take 3 months. One's journeys might take 6 months. One journey might take 6 years. They're on that course, and how they get through it and how they get out of it is within their own time frame. But ensuring that those steps in there and that you can chip away, and knowing those signs and signals. So be like, oh, why am I overly anxious today? Or why am I super fatigued? Well, have you eaten well? No. Okay. Have you slept well? No, I haven't. Have you hydrated? No. Have you had electrolytes, which you got to put back in your body, not just water? Have you got out in nature? Have you got some sun? Have you gone for a swim? My wife takes anxiety tablets each day, and we went to Byron for 9 days. She didn't take a tablet for the whole time. Completely different person. Sun, ocean, where she needs to be, feet on the grass, eating well. Come back home, 1 or 2 day missed tablets, you can start seeing the signs and the agitation. We're at home. There's mess from the kids. There's there's needs and wants, and it falls back into that confined space. So I don't think we weren't meant to, we're in a square room now, but we weren't meant to grow up in work in a square room, live in a square room, dine in a square room. So to be outside and enjoying nature and evolving in that. And I think that's a huge coping mechanism, is getting outside and exploring, and doing those little things that keep one's soul happy.
Definitely, our environment and what we do is so pivotal to our mental health. And I speak a lot, not so much on mental health, because you and myself both know there's this stigma surrounding mental health, and every time we mention it, it's like depression, severe anxiety, ADHD, like all this stuff. This is why I speak about mental fitness. And the way I see it is, it's like a pyramid. At the top, we've got mental fitness. Our baseline is mental health, and below is mental illness. Now, for us, it's about staying above that mental health line. Yeah, we're going to dip down. We lose a loved one, we lose our job, whatever the case may be. But if we have these tools that we just mentioned, going into nature, hydration, food, whatever the case may be, it helps us to be able to stay above that and have the awareness to know when we need help. And a big thing is, a lot of the time we do have awareness, but it's how do we transmute that into actionable steps that we can actually take So for you, we mentioned a bunch of things there, but if you were to give, 3 of your top tips that help you to really keep in positive mental state, like what would they be?
My tips for myself, like, to be honest, is all revolves around lifestyle. Like doing what I enjoy and making sure I do things for myself, because when I do things for myself, I'm a better dad, I'm a better husband, and I'm more applied at work. My sleep's key. Like, I wear a Whoop, thank you Whoop. And this has been a game changer. I don't track calories. I don't look at, how many calories I've burned. I look at my daily strain, gives you a strain score. All I use it is for recovery and sleep. I try and hit 100% of sleep every single night. And I think over this year so far and late last year, I'm averaging 97% sleep need every night. So sleep is absolute key. If I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed. If I'm overwhelmed, I'm more reactive, back to, a bit of old me. I struggle to hold space with my kids. I'm not as patient. Okay, I always eat well. So food plays a really big role there. So making sure I'm eating enough. So it's ensuring that my nutrition, and I don't call it diet because diet is just a fad. So make sure my nutrition is enough because I'm eating for fuel and performance. I'm not eating for an aesthetic purpose. And if you eat for fuel and performance, technically, if you train well enough and you move enough, aesthetics are going to be there. All right, so it kind of works out like that. And doing little things that I enjoy, like it might be a little reset. It might be a 5-minute coffee. It might be, my wife has an Epsom salt bath and she's struggling just to reset. It could be, she might lie in the sun for 20 minutes. Those things work really well. But the main key factors for me is making sure your sleep is on point. Almost same time going to sleep, same time waking up. And obviously people on shift work will, there's always someone that would negate one's advice. But if you go to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time, your body's on that rhythm and it'll love you for it. But getting enough sleep. Like if you go to bed, what time do you go to bed?
Anywhere between 9:30, 10:30, max 11.
Yeah, okay. What time do you wake up?
Between 5:30 and 6.
So let's say you go to bed at 11 and you wake up at 6. All right, 7 hours sleep. It's not really 7 hours sleep. You lose 45 minutes of your sleep cycle. So you're actually sleeping for 6 hours and 15 minutes. So the other day, my alarm goes off Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3:45 in the morning. I fell asleep at 7:40, or 7:45 on the dot actually. So 8 hours sleep technically when I woke up. On my Whoop, 7 hours, 16 minutes. So I lost 45 minutes of sleep within my sleep cycle. So to ensure that my sleep is on point and I'm getting 100% of sleep, people need they need to get their 8-9 hours sleep, because you really only sleep for 8.
Okay.
So sleep is key, food is key, eating enough. Everyone's got their own journey in terms of their nutrition. So I don't usually tell people what to eat. I just guide them. And hydrating, just doing the little things like coffee, training. Training is a big one. If I don't train, I struggle. That's not necessarily because there's any obsession with trying to get bigger and stronger. It's just more of a energy release. And so that when I get home, I've trained, I'm like, sweet, I'm good to go. But if I'm having a day off up here mentally, I know that I'm having a day off, so I'm going to kick back and enjoy it and not worry about having to go, do some silly workout. But literally 3 things: sleep, eat, movement. Easiest things in the world that to speak percentages, like easiest thing in the world, but 80% of the world doesn't do it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting about sleep. How do you get to sleep so early with the kids?
I go to bed with them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so our 2-year-old, so we sleep, so we co-sleep. So I sleep with my oldest and Cassie sleeps with our youngest. We sleep in separate rooms. We haven't slept in the same bed for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
But it's only a short period of time. And our girls love it. So I'll go to bed. So I'll either go to bed with my eldest, like about 6:30, 7-ish, and I'll fall asleep by about 7:30, or I'll put her to sleep, get up, have a cup of tea with Cassie, and then go back to bed. So every single night, I'll be in. There's no later bed than 8:30.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Why the decision to co-sleep? So, like for example, my daughter, I think ever since she was like 6 weeks old, she was in the cot herself, and she sleeps in there every single night. So for you, like, why co-sleeping?
Good question. Like everyone, I give one bit of parenting advice to my clients, and I tell them, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's the only advice I give. And they're like, oh, what should I do here? It's like, do whatever you want to do. So however you want to parent is the right way.
Definitely.
Because you're the parent. So in terms of sleeping, we didn't know what to do with our eldest. We were like, do we sleep train? There's 600 books on one topic, on any topic in the world. You talk about this wood on the table, there'll be there'll be plenty of books to say why it's good, why it's bad, why it's in the middle.
On social media and everyone else tells you.
Yeah, parents, grandparents, we did this and you were okay.
Yeah.
Everyone's different. So we didn't know what to do. We did a little bit of co-sleeping. We tried sleep training. And for us, it didn't sit right with her. She wouldn't sleep in the cot or the bassinet even to start. We tried sleep training. We just couldn't, we weren't able to sit with her with the crying. And we did try it once. We tried it for 10 minutes and we capped it and that was done. We traveled to Europe, went 10 months away of Europe. We put her in the cot next to us.
Yeah.
And we used to lie there and just pat her bum to sleep. And then as soon as we take her hand away, we're like, is she asleep? A minute later, wake up, pat her bum. So I think it was about after 10, 11 months, we were just like, we're going to co-sleep, which we kind of wish we did from the start.
Yeah.
Because it took her about 3 years to adjust. She didn't sleep through the night for 3 years. Yeah, probably 3.5 years. Now she's great. Falls asleep, wakes up, phenomenal, has a nap every day. So we decided to co-sleep. Our beliefs are that they're born, they need to be attached to their mothers. They need to be next to them as close as possible, on them, on their chests, close to us, skin to skin. Back in the day, we grew up in villages or communities and everyone was around and supportive. Now we've got our own homes in our boxes,
Yep.
and we're segregated. So we did the same with our youngest, and our youngest, funny enough, sleeps better than what our eldest did from day one.
Okay.
Because she was in the bed. So I think that's just the way we evolved and what we thought our girls needed. And we wouldn't have it any other way.
It works.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, are they more like dependent now? Like they can't sleep by themselves? Like
No, we sleep with them every single. So I'll take my daughter to bed every single night, or my wife will, and she'll be saying she won't go to sleep on her own. Yeah, okay. They're very dependent. So even nap time, like we had a nap earlier today, and even nap time she won't go to. She needs someone to be there. This transition might be 1 to 8 years, but she'll get to a point where she'll be able to do that. But we really enjoy it, and it allows me to get to bed early.
Sure.
Yeah.
It works. All right. And speaking on parenthood, being a father has been one of the biggest achievements for myself, and I'm sure it has for you. What has parenthood taught you about life?
That there's more to life than yourself. Everything's not, as we said earlier, everything's not about you anymore. It's about these little humans running around, these little dependent humans, and they look up to their sponges. And what we're trying to rectify, and you're always going to cause damage as a parent. Like you cannot raise a child that you do not give them some form of trauma, unfortunately. As lovely as my mum was and Kath, like my wife's parents and my dad and stuff like that, there's always going to be some form of trauma. My trauma is swimming and reading, and there's, the list goes on. But there's more to life than yourself. There's these little kids that you need to mold, you need to shape. 0 to 7 years of age is the most important years of their life. That's when
imprinting stage.
Yeah, it's the imprint stage. So that's when a lot of trauma happens. So a lot of traumas in terms of how parents treat them, how they grow up, what happens to them, how you respond to them. And every parent tries their best. And we're trying to implement ways to try and limit that as much as possible. But yeah, definitely there's much more like they're learning, they're sponging, they're teaching us who we need to be. I don't think my wife knew who she needed to be, and even when we had our first child, I don't think that was the case for me as well at the same time. But our eldest made my wife and I who we are, and then now our second is kind of bringing us along that journey as well and making us into better people for them.
It's funny how we're meant to teach our children about life, but it's usually the other way around, and they teach us so much about life. And as a parent, you mentioned before, we just got to do the best with what we know and the tools that we have. And I think our biggest obligation as a parent is just to be better parents than our own parents.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of, as you said, traumas that get passed down. And it's like, okay, how do we not do that? How do we not implement that into our parenting so that doesn't get passed down? But either way, there's still going to be some sort of trauma because, well, I'd like to say they don't come with instruction manuals, but they come with, I think, too many instruction manuals in books and social media stuff that we can get so caught and lost. So we just got to do what we feel is best. And as we mentioned before, you co-sleeping, me with my daughter in the cot, whatever works, right? We just got to do the best with what we know and try not implement cause too much trauma on them. But at the same time, in a way, I think some traumas are good because it allows them to turn into the version that they need to be, or for themselves, for society, and make them very, how should I put it? It's lost me there now. Just make them a very pivotal part of society so they can turn up and have an impact in this world, wherever that may be, wherever their chosen field is.
I think it's really important as well, but when they're so young is what we try to do is to try and hold space for their emotions. The way I always compare it to is compare it to an adult. If a kid's angry, a kid's tired, kid's crying, and I don't call them tantrums because they're showing emotions. They're sad, they're happy, they're angry, they're anxious, okay, they're excited, whatever emotion they have. If a child's super upset and then crying, a lot of parents would be like, oh, you're okay, stop crying, stop crying. If an adult was crying, the first initial primal response would be like, holy shit, are you okay? What's wrong with you? Are you okay? How can I help? But for some reason, when a child cries, it's flipped on its head. It's like, oh, you're okay, be quiet, be quiet.
Yes, we dismiss it.
Yeah, and it's dismissive. And it's the same. So what we try and do, and it's hard, very hard, because it brings up old trigger responses. Like, for instance, when that's happening, we hold a lot of space for their emotions, but within me, sometimes there's a response and it's like, I've got to breathe through it, because maybe as a child, when I was trying to express emotions, I was numbed. Yeah. So therefore that brings it up when they're doing it. And in order to do that is, it's difficult, but I think that's a really important factor as a parent, is hold space for your kids' emotions. So that's going to allow them to, you can be angry or you can be upset. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be excited. I keep forgetting, but our eldest is only 5.5. I should do things like a 35-year-old and then should do things like a 3-year-old. And then it's really important to be able to hold that space for them to evolve into the person they want to be. And you really want that, for me, that I would love my girls to grow up and have that combination of calm, very kind-hearted, but then the other side of them really fiery and be able to speak their piece and their word. That'd be the ideal situation.
Yeah, it's so important because, especially for us when we're younger, being young boys, suck it up. It's okay. Can't cry, which is why we have a generation of men that feel like they can't express how they truly want to feel. Yeah,
you get injured, it's like, oh, you'll be right, play on, you'll be sweet. I was like, oh, I've broken my arm, but okay. Yeah.
And, we watch rugby league now, and a prime example is, do you remember the Rabbitohs grand final where Sam Burgess...
we're big Rabbitohs fans.
Yeah. So Sam Burgess fractured his eye socket, and that's he's a hero because he played on with that. Yes, to a degree, good on him. But the guy just got fucking injured. He's allowed to express how he feels.
Yeah.
But as a society now, little boys watching that, it's okay, I get injured, I just have to keep playing.
And it's prevalent in sport though, that there's one thing, there's a lot of athletes in sport that have mental health issues. And we're circling back to mental health here, but there's a lot of athletes that have mental health issues. They come out of the system, they're a full-time athlete, and they fall into the trap of depression, because what else do they have now? They don't have a pathway into something else. They're well known, or like you said, it's someone gets injured and maybe you'll be right, play on. They're told to numb their emotions and push through, and then they get to the end of their careers and they're like, well, I've been taught this way my whole life. I've still got to push through, which causes that causes that anxiety, causes that depression, especially when they used to be something and now they're not.
I think bodies are broken.
Yeah, and there's no path, and their bodies are busted. They put it all on the line for 10, 15 years. They'll come up, sign autographs. It's like, oh, Sam Burgess, sign autographs. It's like 5 years later, oh, look, it says Sam Burgess. 10 years later, it's like, oh, it looks like he used to play footy.
Yeah.
Unrecognisable to the new generation of kids coming through. And I think that plays a really big toll on athletes, that they need to have a pathway out of football and not keep him in such a bubble. And a lot of people think because they get paid, especially now social media, the world of social media, Twitter's vile, Instagram, because these athletes get paid a higher dollar, not all of them, but let's talk English Premier League or NBA, because a lot of the general public think they get paid so much money, they're open to vile abuse. They have families, they have kids. It's like, we have families, we have kids. Imagine if you're an elite Premier League player, £300,000 a week, and then you're just copying abuse. You have a sister, you have kids, you have, a wife. I don't think any monetary or elite status warrants any of that, but it has an effect on everyone.
Definitely. At the end of the day, we're all human. Just because you're a professional athlete, you're on TV, doesn't mean you deserve abuse. Even if you play a bad game, like you would know, playing professionally, week in, week out, you're scrutinized for how you play. How does that affect you, when social media and the press are being like, fuck, he's the best. And I know that I think you had a relative that was a high cricketer, you have family members of professional athletes, and that competitive nature, how does that impact you?
Look, to be honest, it was probably lucky because when I was actually playing, so I stopped playing in 2016. There's probably Instagram probably popped up around 2011.
Yeah, okay.
I think. So there wasn't as abusive. We had Twitter, we all downloaded Twitter and people didn't know how to use it. And right at this present moment, like it's some of the most vile content is Twitter because everyone has a voice, has an opinion, and they can't get punched in the face. So pretty much. Not that, I'd punch anyone in the face, but they have the ability to do whatever they want, close their phone and block you and walk away.
The keyboard warriors.
100%. But in that instance, though, I grew up playing cricket as well. So, Grandpa played 79 tests for Australia. There's a statue of him in Melbourne. And then when I played cricket, I had to not live in that shadow, but there was an expectation there. And that didn't bother me too much. I kind of got to a point in my career where I stopped playing when I was about 18, 19. I was playing I played a year at the South Sydney Rabbitohs, and then I quit rugby league and I said, you know what, I'm just going to do cricket and just going to play cricket. And I played about 6 months of cricket and I got to a point where, you know what, this is not me. The game takes too long. I love it. I'm getting bored. I'm getting burnt out. Had a little bit of FOMO because my mates were going out. But it wasn't for me. Although it was only the other week, I probably came to the realization that I was probably twice as good a cricketer as I was a rugby player. So in terms of like going further and making a shitload more money, I probably should have stayed at cricket, especially with Indian Premier League that's come in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But in terms of rugby, like that stuff's not, the positive stuff's good because I feel like when there's something positive written about you, it's like, yes, that's true. I need to prove that. But when something's negative about you, so for instance, when I lived with my sister, used to be fans forum. On the net, you fans forum is like, so-and-so signed this person or, Dave Harvey starting this week and people are like, oh, great kicker or not very quick or, can't really tackle that much. So you go, well, yeah, great kicker, that's easy. I can do that. It's like, well, hold on. Like, yeah, maybe I'm not the best at that, but sometimes there's no response to go, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's really hard to do. And the worst thing for me during my time where was, hopefully my sister listens to this, but she probably won't, but she used to read them all. And she used to tell me about them, and I didn't care. It'd be like an athlete reading the back page of the newspaper. MSN, they'll write whatever they want. They'll pick on one person, pick on Latrell Mitchell for 12 months. Then he does one thing good in the community. They go, oh, fantastic. And then he does one thing bad, and they'll write 10 months bad about it.
Yep.
That's usually what happens. So she would tell me what's going on. I was like, I don't want to hear it. But that was more for her to process it and to get her anger and frustration out, but then didn't understand the consequence of to have on someone else. It's the same with someone on Twitter or whatever. They'll write something to get their own frustration out, but then forget that they're an individual. They've got a family. They've got a kid. And then circling back there. So the positive side of things were great. The negative sides of things were hard to flick out of your head because when you did something that they had said, not on purpose, but maybe missed a tackle. It's like, well, hold on, maybe I am not that good, or maybe I'm not supposed to be here, or I don't belong.
It creates those self-doubts.
Yeah, and then you start questioning yourself, and then obviously there wasn't a lot of self-work back then. I feel like today, if I was the rugby athlete today, like I'm trying to make the CrossFit Games at the moment, completely different sports, individual sports, so you're on your own pretty much. But in a team environment, if I felt like I was the athlete today with the mindset I had today, then I'd be able to excel a whole lot more and work through that. But at the moment, rewinding, like, what is it, 2023, so we're only 8 years and beyond, like it was a little bit of a struggle because as coaches would tell you one thing and then that'll stick in your brain and then that'll eat you away for the whole time. And there's no correction there because I don't think a bit different now, but males back then, they didn't have the ability to admit they were wrong or say sorry or open up. It's like, well, I've told him, deal with it. I'm not going to say sorry, even if I was wrong. We'll move on. I actually had one coach, and he coaches the Waratahs now, and I coached with him, lovely guy. And he was one of the coaches at the start that we had this big competition. It was national comp, and it wasn't to the end of the season that he came up to me, well, albeit at a bar, and he was like, "I apologize. You were actually better than I thought." But that was at the end of it, which is great. Like, good, nice to hear that. But then imagine, like, I think, well, hold on. If you give me the opportunity, imagine the pathways that could have opened. But for him to come out and say that, like, kind of boded well. So that kind of gave me a little bit more of a, probably a little bit more respect towards like to him and what he was trying to do as a young coach at the time.
Yeah, because he eventually owned up to it.
Yeah.
Which is what you need. So many coaches or people out there, they have too much ego, they have too much pride, and they don't own up when they are wrong, which you just discussed. And, for you, that whole season, that probably had a bit of an impact on you each week, not knowing, well, creating self-doubt in yourself because the coach is not really believing in you.
Yeah.
What was that transition like out of rugby? Because we spoke about before, professional athletes, when they stop playing, they kind of have that loss of identity. They get wrapped up in their sport, and that's who they are. So for you, what was that transition out of rugby?
It wasn't too bad. So at the time I was playing Super Rugby at the Western Force, and I'd signed a contract extension. They brought a new coach over. And then I heard on the grapevine and the rumour mill that they're going to get rid of 5 players. I was like, oh, I'll be one of those. So just, had a gut feeling, rang a good mate of mine who was playing at the time. I said, I think I'm going to get, made redundant here. And that's the nature of professional sport. You're a sponge. Well, not really a sponge. You're an item that can be used and thrown away whenever you want. And there's no longevity. There's no consistency. You're on a 1-year contract, 2 year, 3 years. So sign a 3-year contract. Well, if you're a school teacher, you got a job for life. It's a little bit different there. I got kind of made redundant, and I stood my ground in terms of the payout. I was like, they wanted to pay me 50% of the contract. Then they offered 60, they offered 75. I said, that's sweet, it's fine. I'll just come over and I'll be a full-time trainer. I'll train full-time. My sister lives there. I'll live there for free. I'll take the money. I'll send it home. Not big money. You're talking about 95K a year.
Yeah.
Maybe 80K. I can't remember what it was. So it wasn't huge, but full-time rugby, it's good fun.
Yeah.
So finally they folded. 2 months into 2 months into preseason, they folded. I stayed in Sydney. I was like, you can keep paying me legally. I can stay in Sydney. It says in the contract until, at X amount of date. So they paid me. Then I bought my business, which I still have today.
Yep.
9 years later, F45. The transition was pretty good. I kind of got to a point where it's like halfway through, I continued to play a little bit throughout opening the business and stopped playing in 2016. For a couple of years, I did okay, but I did need something competitive, and that's when I took up CrossFit. And I think that's kind of saved me in terms of falling into that lull. Yep. Being depressed, or not so much being depressed, but being in dark moments and really missing that vibe. That definitely has saved me, and that's built like that. And work has saved me as well, because it's team based, like it's a community based. There's a lot of community different. It's almost like going to training. You can bounce off people, and then you come home and you got to do what you need to do. But in terms of that, the transition for me was pretty good. Like, to be honest, like I missed that full time aspect, but my lifestyle's not too dissimilar at the moment, which is really nice. But then that competitive nature is still there with that CrossFit. I think if I give that away right now, I will struggle. There'll be FOMO, but I'll fall into a thing as like, what's my competitive purpose? Because I've grown up, with family full of athletes.
Definitely. For me, a rugby league background, like yourself, I've played semi-professional just locally in Sydney here. And when COVID hit, the season got cancelled, and I was like, what am I going to do? And it made me realize that there's more to life than play footy, than rugby. Yeah, there's so many great opportunities, but there's a lot more important things in life. And that really allowed me to focus on myself, my own personal development, this podcast, and it's taken me to a whole new level. Whereas now, my focus, I play OzTag. That's my competitive edge, and I still play at a pretty high level. Playing State Cup in a couple of weeks. I got a World Cup this year as well over in Ireland, so I'm super pumped at that.
Nice.
That's how I get my competitive edge out. And it allows me to turn up as the best version of myself. Because if I didn't have that, I'd be just like itching in my skin so if I can compete and do something. For you, like, why CrossFit? Why did you pick CrossFit?
Funny enough, I was coaching first grade at the time, I jumped into coaching. I thought, maybe I'll coach. I was coaching first grade senior club rugby. I was assistant coach, funny enough under the coach that spoke to me at the pub that day. And then I was just listening to a podcast. I was like doing F45s, like love it, breathe it. That's my job, the bread and butter. But I was like, well, how can I learn? How can I do something that I don't know what I'm doing? How can I learn a skill that I don't know and then I actually need to apply myself to? Like footy was fine. Like if I played soccer, it was fine. Like I could kick a ball for days. Like I got no issue there. So I'm not going to go play cricket because it takes all day. I've got kids now. And it goes circles back there. I said, I'm not going to do that. I could probably still play cricket. I was like, well, I was listening to a podcast and it resonated with me. The guy, at the time, Marcus Philly, does nothing to do CrossFit at the moment, but he's in the fitness realm. He owns a business now, but he used to be a CrossFit athlete. I just listened to his podcast. I said, this might be what I want to do. And funny enough, took it up. I was rubbish for a year, and learning different movements. Like I couldn't snatch, I couldn't clean, I couldn't do a muscle up, I couldn't do toaster bar, I couldn't do proper chest to bar pull ups. I could do strict ones. I had a good aerobic capacity, so fitness base was excellent. But all these skillful movements, I couldn't do.
Okay. Did you not do any of those Olympic lifts whilst playing rugby?
No, because when I was playing, it was all about bench press and bench press, squat, and bicep curls.
Yeah, a lot different now.
That was completely different now. So we didn't do any of those. So we did a couple, but there was never instilled or taught us.
Yeah.
So, snatching was weird, like overhead squat. Like, why am I putting weight above my head? Like, fast forward almost. So this is my third CrossFit Open. First one, I did okay, but movements were pretty poor. Last year I did quite well. This one, I feel like, I said to Cassie, my wife, not long ago, I said, actually, finally, 2.5 years later, I feel like I belong. Did a big conk in November, and then even up to now, I feel like I really belong, because every movement's down pat, most skill levels are there, but I enjoyed the process, the journey of learning, and like you doing some self-work, dipping in the podcast, learning about other people, learning more about yourself. It's the same. The more I can teach myself something and find it hard, but then come out the other end, I feel like there's a little bit of there's a really good satisfaction in that.
I believe if we're not learning, we're not growing. We have to always be learning something, it could be reading a book, CrossFit, podcasting, whatever the case may be. We should always be looking to improve ourselves. And for you, how important is the support network when it comes to CrossFit? Because I know one of your goals is to go to the CrossFit Games. Is that correct?
Yep. You're tough.
Yeah. What's the process like for that, and how important is having a strong support network behind you?
It's epic. Funny enough, you say that. Like, I used to really struggle with being okay or being allowed to go train.
Yeah.
And that stemmed back to being a 7-year-old. So we go back to that childhood imprint of 0 to 7. I used to struggle. I go, okay, Cassie, I'm going to go train. She's like, yeah, that's sweet. But I used to really struggle with that time away. My sessions are not 45 minutes. They're 2 hours. There's a 20, 30-minute warm-up. Then there's some lifts and there's some fitness and there's some rolling around on the ground. And then a few accessories and I go home. So it's almost averaging 2 hours per session. And try and squeeze in a little bit in between work. So I used to really struggle with it being okay to go train. And that was a really, really good eye-opener for me of how much support I've actually got. Once I got past my own head and going, you know what, I am allowed to train, the understanding of like Cassie going, yep, sweet, you're going to go train. And I can do that. So the support network is great. Like food's sweet, that's on me, sleep's on me. But the training's on us as a family now because we've got kids. So I can't just go, I'm going to train in the morning and train at night. It's quite military style. You're going to train this time on this day, this time. And sometimes it doesn't work. Cassie might be unwell. The girls might be unwell. We duck and weave. But that support network is in our own household, and it's there. And obviously the crew at where I train at Peak at Blacksford, the crew there is phenomenal. Really encouraging. They'll celebrate someone's 20 kilo back squat the same as they'll celebrate someone's 220 kilo back squat.
Yeah.
The way it should be. It shouldn't be about the elites. It should be about everyone at the gym. Every day is human. But yeah, the support's phenomenal. It's really good. Although a lot of lack of understanding from family, like not Cassie, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I don't need that validation. Like I just need the support from my wife, and then I'm good to go.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's awesome because it is such a solo sport, yet it's such a big community as well, where everyone backs up each other and supports each other.
Yeah.
That's what you need. Coming from, the rugby background, you could go hang out with the boys, have that banter, have that support. And a lot of people think when you go into solo sport, you don't have that, you lose that. Whereas I see in CrossFit, you don't lose it, especially where you train and I follow the Instagram and I follow your Instagram. Everyone just backs each other. And so it's an awesome little community to be a part of. And speaking back before around your anxiety around swimming, that had to do with, CrossFit. Is there any other fears that you have that you've had to overcome?
More like self-doubts. That makes sense. Self-doubts and ability. I think that stems from growing up as a rugby player and being told as a young, 17, 18-year-old that, I was too small or not good. I was never really told I wasn't good enough. I was told I was too small, and then that stemmed in and that stigma flowed. And coaches tended to look for, at that time, look for the one negative. They look for the reason to say no as opposed to a reason to say yes. So they looked for the negative, and that negative was going to be, okay, because of that one thing, we're not going to do that. And that kind of stuck with me for a bit. Like I made my Super Rugby debut when I was 29. Most people made their Super Rugby debut when they're 20, 21. So I was lucky enough to play Super Rugby. That was the big goal, big dream. And then, and actually making that debut and actually being able to make it in Sydney, even though I was based in Perth, was even better. But yeah, no, I think with that, like a lot of self-doubt has played a big factor in it. And not doubting my potential and ability. And one of the boys said to me yesterday, and it rings true, is that every time I go into a competition, there's the anxieties there. The anxieties there of, this is going to hurt. Am I going to do well? Like, there's better athletes around me. But then he was like, well, you've done it before. You look back on past experiences and you would have done a workout in the gym that would have been probably harder.
Yeah.
That would have given you a worse stimulus. That's not in a competitive environment, which is, it's proven that you actually perform better. So therefore, like, everything should be okay. So it's more about just teaching myself, a little bit of mental rehearsal, but teaching myself that, these situations are going to be okay. That self-doubt is still there, and it kind of lingers through life for me, as opposed to more so anxieties. Obviously before an event, I get a bit nervous and so this is going to hurt. Like, I don't want to do it, procrastinate. But my sole, not focus, but my probably handbrake is self-doubt.
I seen this quote that Cassie said to you, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah, I've got it tattooed on me. Yeah.
Oh, you do? That's fucking awesome. And it's so true. Like, embrace that fear, embrace those anxieties for what they are, and just go through with it anyway, because it's a sign of something that you need to do. Before an event, you get nervous. Why? Because, you may be a bit anxious, but also you're excited. How do you feel after those events? Fucking awesome, because you've achieved what you've achieved. Even though, prior, as you mentioned before, you've done CrossFit events plenty of times. You may have done those workouts before, but you're still going to get anxious. I've done podcasts plenty before. I still get anxious. But after this conversation, I'm going to feel on top of the world. But it's just by pushing through those and understanding, okay, yeah, cool. I'm a bit anxious. There's a bit of fear. But once I push through that, everything's going to be okay. We just got to get out of our own head.
I think a lot of the times as well, like my wife does it as well. She'll jump on a call and she'll do these courses. She's like, I don't really want to do this call. I'm bit on edge, and then she'll come out of course. She's like, that was amazing. I was like, if we could, as humans, look back and feel like that, look back on these situations that most of the time you've come out better for it. The brain does funny things. It'll find the negative and it'll spit it out.
Yep.
And you'll have that on repeat. But if we can teach ourselves that, shit, every time we've come out of something, we've been okay. Every time we needed to rush out the door, we've actually made it to place. Every time we needed to get the house clean on time, we got the house clean on time. Every time we needed to, do a certain amount of reps in a workout, we actually got there. Very rarely do we fail. Very, very rarely do we fail and fail miserably enough to make you completely stop.
We just think that we will fail.
Yes.
Because it all comes down to what we create in our own head, and it's hard, but we need to stop doing it. We just need to, and I think for me personally, becoming dad's allowed me to slow down a lot more, in the way of being more patient, because every day is different when you have kids. You may be, I'm going to train in the morning, I want to train at night, I'm going to do this podcast, whatever the case may be. But every single day is different. Kids, they may be sick, they may be in a crabby mood and not allowing you to do the things that you want to get done. You just got to go with the flow of things. Definitely. And just be present, be patient, and just understand life's going to throw at you what it's going to throw at you. You just got to be able to adapt and overcome. It's so important.
Spot on.
As we start to wrap up, 2023, in your words, the year of little things, what does that mean to you?
It's a grey area, as one of my mates, Blake, told me yesterday, the little things, the small things. For me, goals are achievable, but they're also unattainable at times in regards to people set big goals and they fall off the wagon. For me, I've been notorious, and I've, no shame in saying it, I've been notorious in not following through, and I'm not holding myself accountable for things. I'll promise, I have great intentions, genuine. But I'll say I'll do something and then I'll struggle to actually follow through the act. It could be as simple as I'm going to do a blog post every week, or I'm going to start my podcast every week, or I'm going to, make sure I write, do a journal every day. For me, the little things are making sure I stay true to my word, have my intentions for each day, do an integrity check-in every night to make sure I've done those little things. And the little things could be as simple as train with intensity. It could be as simple as check emails. Okay, it could be as simple as be present with my girls. So if I've done that on a Monday, I go into Tuesday, I don't have a backlog of emails to do. I've trained really well, so I'm in a good headspace. And then I've been present with my girls, so I can soak up them growing up. And if that goes day by day, week by week, it's going to become second nature. And then those little things are going to lead to that bigger picture. So if I've trained with intensity, I'm getting fitter. If I train with intensity, I'm getting stronger. If I'm eating well with that and sleeping well, I'm going to recover better. Then if I'm present with my girls, I'm going to have a better connection. And throughout the whole year, through the whole year, if I can just be true to my word and have integrity, I honestly believe my whole, not perspective, but my whole demeanor and my world is going to completely change.
Because those little habits, those little 1%ers, they compound over time. Imagine next year, like a year's time, how much of a better person, a better man, a better father that you're going to be just by implementing those daily habits. And do you have daily non-negotiables, or is every day kind of different?
Look, every day's quite in a bit of a rhythm now, to be honest. I don't really get up and go, okay, I'm going to do this. It flows. I get up, I have coffee, play with the girls, or I go to work. I do what I need to do, work with clients. There's no non-negotiables, but at the moment, my non-negotiables that I would like to do are those 3 intentions, and make sure I hit those 3 intentions. And being okay with putting other things aside. There might be work. I had to do work yesterday. I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do any work yesterday. I might do it on the weekend. And even then, what's 24 to 48 hours, I get back to a client, it'll be okay. But to be honest, there's no non-negotiables. Everything's we're in a really good flow where we know what we eat. We know when we sleep. We know when we're exercising. We know when we're playing. We know what we're doing. So if people can set up their life like that, then I think they're able to implement other little aspects into their life, like the small things that allow them to flow. Everything, hopefully for most people, should become second nature. You should be on autopilot, but also be conscious with that. So one of my mates, he said, we have 70,000 thoughts a day. Out of that, 95% of those are subconscious thoughts. So we're only conscious for 5% of those. That's still a lot. But what I want to try and do is my probably non-negotiable is making sure I'm present with my girl. Make sure my phone's away, because I don't want them to see me holding the phone, and that's really hard. So one big non-negotiable is at least just putting that away and being present, whether I'm drawing on a horse or, playing dress ups or whatever it may be. That'll be probably really be non-negotiable for me.
It's a big one, because as we both know, they grow up so quick and they're a sponge. They see everything that you do. So being present and being there for every single moment is so, so important. David, we have a closing tradition on the podcast where the previous guest leaves a question for you.
I like this.
So there's actually 2 questions. One's a serious one, one's a funny one. But what would you rather, peanut butter or Vegemite sandwich?
Peanut butter. Cool. Straight away. If I was stuck on an island, eat peanut butter on toast.
Yeah, I don't know how people eat Vegemite. It's disgusting.
I don't mind. I like Vegemite, but peanut butter, my daughter eats it by the jar.
Wow. All right, the serious question is, If you had one idea of how to positively impact the entire world in your field of expertise, what is it?
If I was able to make people comfortable with their own thoughts and then process it, if I was able to do that and be able to tell them that you are going to come out of the door okay, I think that would be a really good way to impact people. Really good way to impact people, to allow them to realize that everything actually is okay. We're just going to get through that little dark, fiery bit at the start. If I had the ability to do that through my knowledge and content, I would, touch wood, die a happy man.
Well, let me question you, why do you not have the ability? Why can't you do that?
Not the entire world, but if we can do bit by bit, like we said,
Yep.
Like you said with your parents, do better than what our parents did, and then our kids would do better than what we did. And if we can set that trend, then eventually, in time, that could, that might happen.
Awesome. David, appreciate you taking the time to jump on. Where can the listeners find you and support everything that you're doing?
Probably just on Instagram. Dave Harvey 17 is my Instagram handle. Everything's kind of gets filtered through that. If you're on Twitter, don't amuse me. That's the same.
Awesome. Dave, grateful.
Legend. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.